Your eyes, or rather ears, are not fooling you. We are yet in another election. Welcome to NWS Town Hall Studio. On a fine Ramadan night, we are back in action for the new election. Quiet yet tense, that is how you describe tonight's election. Party Democratic Malaysia eager to win once again, while Barisan Rakyat Malaysia raises their bar to give them a run for their seats. While both of the parties fight it out, Party Progressive Rakyat tries to emerge for the second time and get the representation they need. From Perlis to Sabah, the possibilities are endless. The contest is still in contention. The votes are still being counted. The scales are still weighing. It is just a matter of time until the results come in and until the big picture is unveiled. Cumbersome or not, we are here for you. Tonight, it's for all the things that you need. Analytics, discussion, open forum, guests, ordinary citizens, and more. The brain work goes here while the ear work goes in your ears. From eyewitnesses on the scene to the people casting their vote to the officials counting the votes to the operator behind the studio to the host speaking live, your reports will come all over the place and collected into one right here. Tonight, it is 3 for 1. 3 parties for 1 parliament. Welcome to the NWS 80 General Election coverage with me, Cynically Clash. Welcome to the NWS 18 General Election coverage. So it is currently 10 p.m. Malaysian time. We wrote in the script that it will be until 10 p.m. until polling closes and until we can get to see the results. But now it appears that we are already on at 10 p.m. now. So soon enough we'll get to see the results and polling should close by now. Now before we look into the future, let us look into the past. What what do I mean by past? We'll just look over into some political incidents and notable events in the previous term by PDM, held by PDM. So it is the 17th Parliament, 17th government. So here I have guests here. So we have here Ali 14 Irfan from PDM, Spectre Triton from PDM, and also Dark Knight 5996 from BRM. So welcome guests. So I do have some materials over here, and you guys can show some appearance here. Can you guys say hello to the audience for a sec?
Good afternoon. I'm
Yeah, hello,
Spectre
Triton here.
Triton.
All right. So I
Good
have
evening to everyone.
yes, hello there. So I do have some materials here. So firstly, maybe let's go over to the conflict between the government and the legal professionals qualifying board, and maybe Triton is more knowledgeable in this topic because he has been the one to have been the minister for this term. So, Mr. Triton, can you maybe describe and maybe sum up the situation of the conflict between the government and the LPQB?
Well, for this situation is actually pretty much a misunderstanding between two bodies of the government. On behalf of the government, representation by the chief secretary and also the board. It's basically something that we want to avoid in the future because there is a lack of communication. Henceforth, why this thing happened in the first place.
So, can you describe
Whatever the
exact?
conflict. And,
All right, you can
um,
continue. Continue.
well, yeah, okay. So basically, the chief secretary was trying to find a way to pay for our legal sector because we have an issue currently. We have currently a crucial issue for the legal sector, which is we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough manpower, and the graph isn't increasing. We have seen since 2022, since the um three terms ago, the government under I believe who was it, Yao, and then before Yao we have Mer, and the amount of local lawyers have not increased actually, and our initiative back then was just getting Commonwealth transfer, getting I said I think I said it before, but I said it again. I will say it again. We been getting lawyers from UK, from the Canada, to actually help our judiciary and our legal system to function properly. However, this is no longer the case. We should sustain ourselves, and obviously, we have seen a significant decrease in our legal manpower because our foreign precisely our judges from the Commonwealth countries are already long gone. So we don't have a communication, a precise communication with the former Lord President Yihang, and I can basically say that we assume that um, he did say that he was discontinuing the legal the CLPE, yeah, the certificate in legal practice examination, and that was what led that was one of the reason why our chief secretary, in inheritance of our prime minister, our minister of justice, decided to opt to an alternative, which is our closest alternative, the Singaporean bar exam. And that's where the issue started, the conflict started. Well, there is a fall in our behalf. I admit it, and the chief secretary has made his apology to the public, and he also admitted his mistake, and he tried to mend it by trying to organize a meeting between members of the board. So that is technically, and in a nutshell, what the issue is about. I think it's fair that we say that it was resolved actually, because um, we did see an outcome of it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Triton. So let me just add that one another question here. So, you mentioned that the chief secretary was involved, right?
Yes, yes.
All right. So let me just ask this question because, uh, in government policies, ministers are supposed to be the one discussing, negotiating about the policies that they're gonna apply. But in this case, the chief secretary has put a big role, has involved himself in multiple government policy choice making. So why was the chief secretary involved in this conflict? I mean, we expected that the Minister of Justice, uh, intelligent renegade, is supposed to be the one that is involved in the situation, the one that is supposed to be involved in this conflict. And yet, we see the chief secretary always going at them, always going at the LTQB, always going after the people who are questioning the decision of the government. So basically, why was the chief secretary involved in this conflict?
To answer your question, I believe this is a question that is regarding how we work. So basically, the chief secretary acts on behalf of the Minister of Justice, Intelligence and Renegade, because our minister was actually aware, and I believe, since I believe you are a member, so you have seen him discussing behind the scene, but um whatever involving public relation, like um announcement to the public, that is done through the chief secretary. That's why we see a lot of involvement between the chief secretary and the legal board, I believe. um and I believe that was a time of period where the minister of justice cannot be available too much in Roblox because he has an real life issue. Therefore, he just ordered and relayed what he wanted to the chief secretary so that he can help him.
Okay, but again, in making government policies, usually only ministers are involved, right? And then if the chief secretary, if the sorry, if the minister of justice cannot be there, there should be the deputy minister of justice. So in the government, was there minister, a deputy minister of justice?
Yes, there was a deputy minister of justice, I believe. Yes, there was.
So why was he not involved in this situation?
Well, technically speaking, and this is just my observation. The deputy minister of justice does not hold any legal certification from any country. So I believe on such matter like this, it's unwise for him to really take up the role to actually do the thing that involve decision making, especially when we are talking about a crucial policy that would that would dictate the future of our legal sector. But and the chief secretary, coincidentally, is one of the most experienced person in the legal sector. So that's one of our reason of not letting the deputy minister really taking up the job directly.
Okay, but then you have the prime minister, and then if the deputy minister of justice, deputy minister of justice is actually supposed to be the next best thing that we are offered with in this government. And even then, we also have the minister. You also have the prime minister who holds the who holds a certificate in legal practice, right? So and so here we have the question: why didn't we uh put this? So sorry, why didn't we put this responsibility on the prime minister? Because this is an issue also relating to the administration's decision, right? This involves the administration. This
Mm-hmm.
involves Mr. Yang 16. This involves uh, many parts of the administration because again, this ministry is a for is one of the oldest ministry to date compared to the MOYS, and then the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of, like I just said, the Ministry of Youth and Sports. So why didn't the so why wasn't the Prime Minister involved in this situation?
Well, he was actually involved. I believe he was the one doing the talking with the board to actually settle down the issue alongside with the chief secretary. Obviously, um, I think he did play his role well. Because he was also the one who was in touch with our attorney general to actually figure out what the solution to the problem was. Though it might seem that he is not involved because he does not. I believe he didn't make any announcement or any press release regarding this issue himself. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Triton. So let's just go over to the opposition's opinion, Mr. Dark here. So, Mr. Dark, what is the party's move on the government's decision to replace the CLPE with the Singaporean bar exam?
Thank you, Clash. So for opposition, at first we are quite shocked that the government decided to pick Singapore bar exam compared to the CLPE because as our knowledge, CLPE is the most longest and the main exam that exists in our judicial sector, which we also think that is there any miscommunication or something. So our chairman, Mr. Haikal, also released a press statement regarding to our views on we would like to let the prime minister to explain instead of the chief of oh, the chief secretary of the government, which is Mr. Secretary, to speak on because we our opinion is Prime Minister is handle with the judicial sector, which we think that is maybe something miscommunication. And also we think that the Prime Minister did not have mentioned or notified to the LPQB in making the decision. So this move is sounds like already insulting and underestimate the Malaysia legal system. So our opinion is release a press statement, and then we try to let the Prime Minister to explain to the public on how the decision is making. Even we need an alternative way compared to like doing the Singapore bar exam, something like that in our opposition views.
All right. So, Mr. Dark, you mentioned that the LPQB wasn't notified of this change, but I would beg to differ. You mentioned the LPQB were notified of the change, but again, the LPQB was actually notified. So, where did you get this information, or did you misunderstand the situation?
Probably is there is the misunderstanding in opposition too, but I believe that at the first LQPB did mention that they did not get the notify, and and then after our chairman released the press statement, we realized that oh maybe the LPQB did get notification in some way else, and we did not notice that. So there is a misunderstanding in opposition too.
Okay. So, if it was a misunderstanding, and I believe so, so why did the some of the people say that the opposition party BRM was quote unquote jumping on the bandwagon here? Uh, is is uh is the BRM really jumping on the bandwagon, or do they fully understand the situation that was going on with the between the LPQB and the government?
I could say that opposition did not involve with the government so much until we have some like understanding in the government decision. But I believe that what we are trying to do is we try to represent our peoples to voice up on why the reason and what is the decision making for changing in the judicial sector.
I mean, that is the basics of opposition. They really don't know what is really going on internally within the government, but the base expectation that the people have is that we have the basic understanding, that we have somewhat of an analysis, that just maybe just on the minimum we have that basic understanding of the situation. We analyze it, and then we make and then we make our conclusions there, we make our own conclusion. But then again, so did the opposition party really understand what was going on the situation? Or were they really just jumping on the bandwagon, as people say?
I could say that people is saying half correct and half is incorrect because we really did analysis, but in another ways what I saw is they just did mention that why they are changing the CLP into the Singapore bar exam, but they did not really realize that they have doing with notification to the LPQB. So I think that what BRM is trying to do is they just doing the aspect of voice up these things and try to mention to the government to detailedly mention to the public on what exactly that happened, because just like opposition there is still some public that not really involved in, they may be also misunderstanding like what exactly that happened today.
All right then. So now let me just go over to Triton again. So related to the question of the chief secretary. So Mr. Dark did mention that the people were demanding answers from the prime minister himself rather than the chief secretary. So my question is, why did the chief secretary why was the chief secretary speaking more on the situation rather than the prime minister who has a more complex grasp of this issue? Why was the chief secretary speaking as if he was the prime minister?
Sir, Clash. Thank you for the question. In defense of the Prime Minister and the Chief Secretary, I believe the Chief Secretary was not acting like he was the Prime Minister. In fact, every issue of statement or change that was given to the public or not is actually under the order of the Prime Minister. Despite seeing it, yeah, maybe I understand that some people might see that chief secretary is like doing everything and overpowering the prime minister, etc. But in reality, we actually have the system of the chief secretary going to the cabinet and then getting our approval, especially the prime minister, and it was all under the approval of the prime minister. It's
Right.
basically what we were trying to establish.
Okay. So again on the chief secretary again, this is not just exclusive. This is not exclusive to the situation between the LPQB and the government. The the involvement of the chief secretary has been huge in many of the government's policies. Sometimes even involving himself in it. I mean, come on, media academy, a lot. I mean, a lot of them, a lot actually, just a lot. So I I have to repeat a lot because there is just so many government policies that the chief secretary has been involved in. So my question is the government really is the government really coordinated by the prime minister who is at the very top of the hierarchy to be coordinating his ministers, or is the chief secretary really doing all the work here?
Yeah, Clash, can you clarify the word involve? How exactly do you define involve in our situation currently?
I mean, a lot of involvement, right? Just presence in the government policies, maybe advices, maybe but in terms of advices, right? The advices has been very complex, very complex, sometimes very simple, and sometimes he goes into a defensive mode. He goes defensive on the government, which is not usually of chief, which is not usually normal of chief secretary, in my opinion. Usually they're there for the administrative works, maybe rarely speak to the public. But in terms of chief secretary position, in terms of that baseline, right? In terms of that baseline, the chief secretary has been very outspoken. It's not really that clarifying it's not really that clarifying of oh hey, sorry, we would just like to clarify that. But in in terms of the chief secretary, he has been very outspoken to the point, well, it is to the point, well, how he speaks is very opinionated tone. I'm not assuming he's opinionated or something, since he's chief secretary and he has to maintain a political neutrality, but I'm just saying he speaks that very opinionated tone where he's very critical of people criticizing the government, rather than usually just doing the conventional things, such as clarifying and more.
Well, Clash. Yes, I see what you're trying to um perceive right now. Well, the chief secretary, he is actually a key individual in many ministry because a lot of government policies are done through the ministry. Of course, through the minister, and under him is the ministry. We have through the civil service. We have a lot of I believe we have at least 13 members of the civil service currently, excluding the Ministry of Defense, because the Ministry of Defense does not rely a lot on the civil service on doing their policy. This is why the chief secretary is somehow perceived to be heavily involved, because a lot of resources comes from him. For example, Media Academy is actually done by the minister himself, and also by a lot of supporting staff in the Ministry of Communication and Multimedia. There is currently two staff, I believe. And the chief secretary remain crucial in this ecosystem of ours, because he will keep things in touch. He is the head of civil service, obviously. Therefore, he have the responsibility to actually um, coordinate them, um, give them job, send them to their respective ministry to ensure they are doing their job properly, so that we can fulfill our policies. But on the issue of him defending the government, it was not actually something that I would call he wasn't representing the government. I believe what he was doing, he was just giving out his thoughts personally, because we did not tell him to defend us. We did not tell him to argue with people. Um, it is his personal opinion, and I believe he has the right to do so. Um, as long as he upholds the political neutrality, etc. And I think it's fine. We have no control over what he says as an individual. But as chief secretary, when he's doing his job, then it will be another story. But most of the time, we just see him arguing people. We can see him debating with people, but I don't think he is doing that in the capacity as a chief secretary, as a head of civil service. But instead, he is just a normal guy trying to debate, because that is the nature of him. We all know him for a long time, right? You are his I believe you idolize him, you know. So I should hope that you know him well.
All
That's
right.
all I can say. Yeah.
All right. So that is a great insight into the characteristics of the chief secretary, of the former chief secretary, right there. And thank you for that answer, Mr. Triton. I wish we could continue, but right now we'll just head over into break. So we'll just see you in the next 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hey bro, you should just invite secret if you don't want to talk about it.
Yo, 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 hello, hello. Alright.
All right. So I believe 10:28 we're gonna go back. So don't just mute yourself real quick. Later 10:30 I will call you to speak later on. Then when I call you to speak. Okay, okay, okay. All right, welcome back, audience. So now we are going back to our previous conversation there with Mr. Triton. So, Mr. Triton, you mentioned that we knew the chief secretary, we know the nature of the chief secretary. So, I would like to ask this, which is which is very unconventional of governments to be, favoring one person in the ministry, one person in the in the civil service rather, which is usually unconventional, right? So I would like to ask this one thing: is the government one-sided towards the chief secretary?
Can you like give me what are you trying to perceive with one-sided? Like how exactly are we one-sided?
I mean, one-sided, right? Maybe you can just say bias. Maybe there's a possible bias with the chief secretary. I mean, that is all. It's pretty clear.
Well, I believe there is no type of bias because the prime minister and the cabinet appointed him based on his merit alone without considering anything else. Um, and to be frank, there was no bias because I can say that some ministry is actually um, kind of trying to separate themselves off from the civil service. Otherwise, we will have the chief secretary, the former chief secretary, on every ministry. But the proof is he's not in Ministry of Defense. He's not in the Ministry of Youth and Sports. He's not technically heavily involved in the Ministry of Transport. A lot of ministry can run smoothly without the chief secretary. The, yeah, I think there is no bias actually because I have my disagreement with him and I voiced them out in the cabinet. I voiced them out in the government and he was okay with it. There was no yeah.
All right, audience. So it is currently now at 10:30 p.m. So based on what we have heard from SPR and other reports from our journalists, I believe we will be uh receiving information and the seat announcements from I believe KLCC, if that is the plan from this SPR. So let me just ask the party representatives today. So we have looked into the past. Now let us look into the present. Now we just looked from the past on the government performances. Now on the incidents. So let's just now go over to the present, to the election. So let us start from Mr. Dark. So Mr. Dark, how are you feeling, and are you confident that PRM is gonna win big tonight?